Today, we're going to take a closer look at everything that's happened to AMD in the past week or so. We've seen various price target changes. We've seen some great excitement with press releases of the MI350, the upcoming MI400. The company was also even at a recent conference where they did share a lot and a lot of great information that I think all AMD stock investors should know. So let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
Let me know if this is something you guys want me to do more often. I obviously cover NVIDIA a lot through this channel, but AMD is still a nice portion of my overall portfolio. Would an AMD weekly, maybe at the end of the Friday or maybe early Saturday, work for you? Kind of create all this great information that has come out for this semiconductor player. If it is, let me know in the comments below. But let's look at the past 5 days. AMD right now sitting at $158.57. In the past 5 days, the stock is up roughly 4%. Now, year to date, the stock is doing pretty well, up roughly 31%. And from its year to date high, the stock is down roughly 14%, right? We kind of got that excitement after earnings, that strong results, the overall AI market kind of doing really well. Now we're seeing a bit of a pullback. Some of the great things that came out is first, I actually found this pretty interesting. Elon Musk today, or September 12th, is that today? Yes, September 12th, replied to this funny post about Jensen. And it's kind of like, it's supposed to be like, excuse me for maybe not knowing exactly, but it looks like more of like a poem coming in from Jensen himself, supposed to kind of explain a little bit of what NVIDIA does, but also in kind of a humorous way. And Elon kind of responds to it and says, although AMD is now working pretty well for small to medium sized models. I would say this could be seen as a bullish indication for AMD and their team that they are definitely progressing both in the hardware and software space and now are becoming somewhat known in this industry, right? We know Elon Musk is the owner of XAI or kind of one of the owners of XAI, is an important figure there. And XAI was actually at an AMD's AI event. So Elon does know what will most likely have a great indication of how AMD is progressing. For him to kind of respond to this and kind of say this, I do believe it could give a little bit of bullish hope for AMD bulls. Now I want to start off, I want to move on to some price targets. So there were two price targets that happened this week. And the first price target was from HSBC, and that happened on September 9th. They continue to hold a buy rating on AMD, but they decreased the price target to 185. That was the overall downgrade. Now, there was another group. The second group I'm not too familiar with is Earth State Group. They did go from a buy down to a hold with no real price target, or we'll see in a bit. But regardless, two kind of negative bearish sentiments for the stock, both for different reasons. Now, personally, me, no matter what company, I could care less. I don't know if that's I couldn't care less, whichever. I don't really care what analysts say or their price targets, or if they give it a buy or sell. I do understand, though, that things like this could create some short-term momentum in a stock price. People listen to it. It creates media news. It creates kind of some form of reaction towards the stock. Now, what I'm more curious is to see what they say and for the reason. So first here, HSBC, and HSBC was the one that cut the price target. It's still a buy, but for them, they did reduce the price target from $200 to 185. Well, from 200 to 185. And the main reason is Lee acknowledges, which is the analyst here, that AMD's new MI355 could still have pricing power that could surprise the market. However, Lee kind of reduced the price target, the average selling price for this GPU. The main reason is depending on the customer, if a customer is making better orders or bigger orders, they can actually request or haggle for a cheaper price. Before, he had an average selling price of $25,000. Now he believes that the way the market is moving is going to be closer to $23,000 per unit of the MI350. And in the long term, for the 2026 AI GPU revenue estimate, this would go from 15.1 billion to 13.9 billion. Obviously makes sense. If you're expected to sell less chips or a lower price, even if you sell the same amount of chips, you're going to reduce it because you're selling it at a cheaper price. And now for the way he derives his price target, it's all dependent on the revenue and earnings. So because of that, he still believes it's a buy, but he directly trimmed the price target to 185. Now, it is important to know that Lee noted that his forecast is still about 20% above Wall Street consensus, meaning he believes most analysts continue to underestimate AMD's pricing potential or even revenue potential, right? So this analyst believes AMD can do about $14 billion in AI GPU revenue next year, 2026. And this is one of the more bullish side of the analysts in the market. Now, the other thing is that Lee also pointed out that there's obviously going to be strong demand for the MI400. If you have been following this channel, you know that the MI400 was one of the products I do believe was going to be competitive to AMD NVIDIA solution and does have some nice strength. One of the biggest strength is the ability to connect 72 GPUs, which is extremely crucial in this AI space. Now, okay, this price target, well, I'm not concerned about the price target. Okay, I can maybe see if they are getting bigger orders, if the customers are a little bit more hesitant, AMD might have to decrease the prices. Nothing to there, but nothing that would cause me to sell the price. I still believe it's a nice long-term hold. Now, the second analyst here was Erste, I believe, right? Or Erste Group. And they downgraded it from a buy to a hold. They don't seem to have a price target, but the downgrade comes as the analyst expresses concerns about AMD's operating margins, which he noted are lower than the sector average. He piloted, and this is pretty much it, right? So it's like, hey, look, you're making less money than the overall market. For that reason, I'm going to reduce your overall rating. I don't have a price target for you, but I'm reducing your rating to a hold. Now, I am pretty curious. Let's kind of go here to fiscal.ai. And if you are curious and I want a lot of great data for an extremely cheap price, definitely check out fiscal.ai/Jose. I use this website on a daily basis, figuring out so much happening in the industry, obviously in the semiconductor industry for me. But I wanted to look at overall ratios, and let's look at not trailing valuations, but forward valuations. We're going to look at the forward PE ratio, which is the next 12 months from now. Right now, AMD is trading at a forward next 12 months PE ratio of 31.32. Now, let's actually look at what it has been trading in the past 5 years, and let's kind of put it into toggle the mean line. I prefer the median over the mean. So let me just rephrase that. Let me toggle the medium line instead of the mean. And we can see right now the stock is trading a little bit under its median. So I don't think AMD is undervalued right now. I also don't think it's overvalued based on historical levels. That can obviously change depending on the growth. But to me, AMD, if anybody's curious, is more of still like a dollar cost average, not load up the truck. It's kind of light dollar cost average, continue to build up opportunity if I need to get more exposure. And also, if you're enjoying the episode so far, make sure to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. This is the best place you're going to get any semiconductor news. The other thing that we saw this week is Bank of America. I thought this was pretty interesting. Usually it doesn't mean much to me, but Bank of America reported on September 3rd of 2025 that Advanced Micro Devices, despite being an outperformer in the sector, has become the most underowned U.S. semiconductor stock among active managers. Active ownerships fell to 20% in August from 23% in May and about 39% a year ago. I think that is extremely wild, and sometimes I actually find it a little bit bullish when people are a little bit more bearish on the stock. So now a lot of people are not watching it. They say it's maybe game over. If AMD obviously has some great results, those active managers are going to come back here and could create more of a buying pressure for the stock that could kind of increase stock prices. So again, not something that I follow, but maybe you might be curious about that. Now, the next few things that I want to go is things AMD actually released. AMD has a really great YouTube channel, and if you are a investor, I definitely recommend watching it and subscribing to it. Every so often, I believe it's almost on a weekly basis. I don't know if it's every 2 weeks, maybe in every 2 weeks, they release an episode called Advanced Insights. And this is where a management or someone higher up in AMD has pretty much a podcast, and they kind of talk about great products. Their most recent one that came out 2 days ago was quantum computing with IBM. So AMD here talks a little bit about the about quantum computing and the IBM partnership. We can see about 2 weeks ago, they had one Insight Copilot PCs with Microsoft, Advanced Insights, episode 25. So if you are curious about the semiconductor market, if you are curious for AMD, I definitely recommend taking a closer look at their YouTube channel, as they do share a lot of information. Based on the views, you can kind of see that maybe the market is really not that excited about AMD. And that also kind of shows that even though maybe we might think this is a popular stock, it's not getting the traction that obviously like your NVIDIA is getting. Now, the next thing I want to take a closer look at is AMD on September 8th, earlier this week, kind of talked a little bit about their MI350 series, which they believe is a game changer for inference training and high performance computing workloads. Now, I also have another press release, and outside of that, we do have a quick conference, but a lot of great information. So again, if you guys are enjoying it, let me know in the comments below. I am going to say, if you're not familiar, my biggest position is NVIDIA. So I am a little bit more critical on AMD on the bearish side, but I am very bullish on this company because I do own it, right? So if later on, maybe I might put a little bit more pressure, I think it's good. I think if you are an investor, it's not always good to just hear the yes guy all the time. So there might be somebody out there more bullish on AMD. I try to be more critical to it. And I think that's what gets me excited about this stock, because even with the criticalness that I give it, I'm still bullish in it in the long term of things. So it's like I see the bearish side and I try to present it. But even with that, I still want to own this position, this company, because I do believe there is an opportunity, especially with a company in the AI space that is sitting at a market cap of $257 billion. I don't believe it's going to be the next trillion-dollar company this year or next year, but maybe in a 5-year time frame, I do believe could be a three-bagger. A 750 still a three-bagger. That is pretty impressive to me. I mean, the market only gives you a bagger every 7 years or so, right? If you invest in the S&P 500, in theory, you get it multiplies, it doubles within 7 years or so. And I believe it can do more than that in less time frame. That gets me excited, and that's why I'm bullish in this overall stock. But let's jump back into the MI350, right? So they kind of compare the MI350, and first they want to compare it against their previous product, the MI300. In different workloads, here we can see for the Llama 3.1 405 billion parameter, the MI355 is way better than the MI300. In AI agent chatbots, it's about 4.2 times better. In content generation, about 3 times better. On average, we can see it's at least a 3xer better than the MI300, which was released, 2 years ago. So great innovations here for AMD in the infant size. Now, AMD also wanted to take a shot at the top dog. They kind of mentioned that the MI355 for inference is better for larger models versus the B200 and the GB200. For the B200, they actually show that they are better, 1.20% better here in DeepSeek, 1.30% better here in Llama 3.1 405B. There is a small caveat here. And again, I just want to talk about asterisks. I think asterisks is important. When AMD does these tests, they do it on equal GPU count, which is usually 8 GPUs. The reason being is AMD can really scale up really good to up to 8 GPUs into a node. After that, there's seems to be a little bit of a weakness. And this is where NVIDIA really improves. And this is where NVIDIA kind of has the strength right now. It's not necessarily in the individual chip. Some people can say even on an individual chip, AMD has a better chip than NVIDIA if you're looking at a single GPU. But it's no longer about just one chip. It's how you can connect them together, how you can put them together. And that's where something AMD is lagging behind. So when they do these comparisons, they're only looking at where they can kind of really hit that max peak. If we were looking at these massive clusters, I do believe the answer would be different, but at least it still shows that there are certain markets that maybe you might need very small clusters, very small nodes. AMD definitely gives you that opportunity to succeed. And maybe this is why Elon can kind of go through this, is although AMD is now currently working well for small to medium sized models. So you can kind of get that the evidence of what Elon is saying and here, but it just showcases for the smaller models. The other thing that we are seeing is, again, very competition. They mention it even in training. they're actually doing either better or on par than some of NVIDIA's solution. This is comparing the B200 and B200, the GB200. So they are comparing it to almost a now product. We do know that NVIDIA is already shipping the GB300 though, which is way better than the GB200. So small caveats here, but regardless, you still get that bullish indication that AMD is somewhat competitive to NVIDIA in this space. Now, the MI350 GPU isn't just about being faster. It's also about being efficient. And you talk about in certain workloads, they provide 40% better tokens per dollar than the B200. And the other thing that they mention is they are great at plug and play. You can actually just swap out the MI300 and put in the MI355, and there's no heavy changes to the platform. It's a lot cheaper, especially if you already have an MI300. So they're showing that they have advantages in certain TCO markets, which I think is pretty important to see. They also talk about one of their biggest customers, Sheer Trusted Performance. They mentioned Oracle Cloud Infrastructure continues to benefit from a strategic collaboration with AMD. They will be one of the first to provide the MI355X rack scale infrastructure using the combined power of AMD EPYC, which is their CPU, the Instinct, which is the GPU with the MI355, and Pensando, which is the DPU market. So overall, the first thing that I can definitely say is AMD is going in the right direction. It is not there to kind of battle the king, but it is going in the right direction, especially with what Elon said, maybe baby for the small to maybe medium-sized models. Now, the other thing that they did announce is AMD showcased their MI300, MI325, and MI355 at a benchmark. So for those that are not familiar, there is the MLPerf benchmark, which is industrial benchmark, which is crucial because you really get to see how things are progressing. This is the inference side. Every few months, you kind of get one for inference, the other one you get for training. Now, what's for the inference market is version 5.1. If you want to look at this benchmark, it's a little tricky at first, but it's very easy to, once you get used to it, you go to ML Commons, you go to benchmarks, and right now it is the MLPerf Inference Data Center. AMD did bring the MI300, the MI325, and the MI350 to this benchmark, and they showed some great results comparing to their overall performance. The first thing is the MI355 is bringing FP4 precision. This precision allows for, before for the MI325, it was only FP8. Here with the MI355 is FP4. In theory, just by changing that type of precision rate, you're doubling it, right? Because you go from 8 to 4, you're able to do twice as much because you're using twice as less or half the amount of compute you needed before. So from this alone, from the MI355 to the MI325, which is FP4 versus FP8, you saw a 2.7 improvement. So 2 times, obviously, from the cut in half in the precision rate, but then the rest from the improvements coming in from the MI355 versus the MI325. I may be honest, I would have wanted this to be a lot bigger. Most of the growth is obviously coming just from the pure precision decrease. But overall, great thing. The also thing that AMD mentions is they are trying this interesting, innovative way of doing hardware efficiency with intelligent optimization to tackle one of the biggest customer challenges, which is how to serve massive models at scale without exploding infrastructure costs. And they call it this depth pruning method. They provide a solution here where if you only do about 20% depth pruned on the model, you see massive improvements, lower compute requirements. You also see further boost in inferencing efficiencies, which for a business would reduce compute per token, improve resources utilization, and supports emerging generative AI models. So here they did showcase a lot of great things. And again, they continue to show the improvements of AMD's solutions. The other thing is these benchmarks, they tend to have different models, right? You can kind of do different scenarios. You can do like DeepSeek, you can do Llama, various Llamas, Llama 2, Llama 3, you can do Mistral, you could do Stable Diffusion. AMD, this is one of the, they're just getting started. So they're not doing every model just yet. NVIDIA does every single model and they destroy it. But AMD is, I think last time they only did 1 or 2 models. Now they increased the amount of models that they're doing. It shows the following. It shows that their software is improving and is going in the right direction. So again, that's a bullish indication that their software market is developing. is developing, and they're able to showcase it to the public. Now, again, feel free to check this presentation out. The other thing that I found pretty interesting here is this was one of the first times in this performance where they showed a heterogeneous submission. And what that means is they actually submitted AI cluster running MI300s and MI325s, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. And it kind of shows that if you are maybe a person that owns the MI300, you could buy the MI325 and not even have to start a new system. You can just expand that system that you have, and you still see some improvements coming in with that. So for customers, it does have some clear benefits. So overall, that's bullish. And now what I want to do is kind of jump into the presentation that AMD was in on September 8th. So if we go to AMD's Investors Relations website, you can kind of go to news and events, IR calendar. And on September 8th, they were at Goldman Sachs technology conference. You can kind of click it. You can even look at the audio and read the transcript. I'm going to mention some of the things that I found pretty exciting about this. First is they mentioned that AI is driving incremental CPU demand beyond just GPU, right? So that's pretty impressive. I mean, there's certain workloads that can still be driven by CPUs. And obviously, if you need more GPUs, a CPU needs to be behind X amount of GPUs. So that's there. The second thing that they talk about is what we know already. Power and data center availability are the real growth limiters, not demand. So right now, I want to say this might be actually controlling an over inventory issue, right? If there was enough power in data centers, companies would be buying like no tomorrow. But now that they have to wait to make sure the AI infrastructure build-outs can continue and they are limited to power and data center real estate space, it controls the demand a little bit. In my opinion, that helps make sure that the AI market can continue to grow over time because you really are not able to spend all the money you want. AMD was also very, very excited about the MI400. They actually mentioned that MI400 is perhaps akin to their Milan moment. And for those that are not familiar with Milan, this is their third generation EPYC CPU. And they believe that was the market where they started to have leadership performance across the server CPU space. They believe the MI400, 450 will be that for AMD, would be the no asterisk, the no BS. This is going to be a leadership product. The MI300 was their first one. The MI325 and the MI350 were us just trying to understand more of the software space. Now we got everything good, and the MI450 is that product. It's the one that we're not going to complain about. The other thing that they mentioned is AMD, when they started the CPU race in the server CPU, they had to establish customer relationships, right? They really were in a zero market share. Luckily, this is the same data center market that they have with CPUs. So with AMD in the GPU market, one thing that they do have on their hand is they are already have some relationships with these customers. They already have relationships with Microsoft, with Google, with Amazon. So if their GPU for the AI space becomes really strong, they will be able to sell it a little bit faster, opposed to being the first kid on the block where no one knew about the CPU space. The other thing that we are seeing is AMD's CPU market continues to grow. We saw from Mercury, I think they mentioned Mercury's research, that right now they have 41% current share in server CPU, and they grew 8% this year. And they expect to continue to pick up at this speed. AMD is dominating the server CPU market, and I do believe this is very bad for Intel, especially for the server CPU space, because as you know, in the CPU market, it's very hard to switch. And if they're picking AMD, I think it's going to be very hard for them to switch later on. So AMD is getting a nice strength right now as Intel has lagged dramatically. Next, AMD is pricing for premium value, not market share. They mentioned in their CPUs, they actually charge more than competitors. The main reason is because they have a premium product. They eventually want to do that in the CPU side, but obviously you have a little bit more competition there than in the CPU market. The other thing is AMD is mainly focused on a few customers here in the AI space. They're not looking for the full long tail. The full long tail, right? The long tail in theory is it's very thick at first, and then it gets thinner and thinner and thinner. They're focused more on just the thick part, and I'm pretty sure someone's going to say something about that. But on the thick part, because it's only about 20 or so customers. Those 20 or so customers are including the hyperscalers. They're the ones that spend most of the money. Even though it's 20 customers, they probably spend about 80% of the money in the AI space. So they rather focus on that. They mentioned that NVIDIA, because they've been doing this for so long, they have the full long tail. But they rather just focus on those 20 customers, the lead customers that are going to matter. Now, there were two other things that I found pretty interesting here. AMD does mention that they do expect material MI450 revenue next year. If that makes sense, that's obviously 2026. The reason I found that interesting is because the MI450 is expected to come out in late 2026. So for it to contribute dramatically or drastically, they mentioned material contribution. That's some strong numbers. Next year, either they're going to be releasing the product pretty early or they're going to have a lot of inventory right off the bat, which is interesting and unique to me. Usually it's a ramp process, but they mentioned strong revenue from the MI450 starting next year. And like I mentioned, AMD is only focused on that 80 to 85% market, but I already actually talked about that. So no need for me to cover that again. Regardless, I think there was a lot of great news here for AMD. I do think there were some bearish news and maybe not too bearish. One of the things that I do think NVIDIA, AMD investors should kind of be familiar with is the CPX GPU that NVIDIA just recently announced. The process is, it's not the actual technology that's different, but it's just the efficiency that NVIDIA has created is kind of going to create maybe a little bit more of a competition for the MI450. I talked about it in another episode. Make sure to check it out if you are more curious about that. But regardless, I do think AMD has an opportunity. It's, I don't think, a for sure thing. And that's why it gets me excited for AMD. When you're a for sure thing, you don't have the opportunity to be a multi-bagger. If you were a for sure thing, the market would already have priced you for it. AMD is a company that can benefit dramatically from this AI space, that can provide some great products. But because that can is not guaranteed, and there is that heavy competition, if they do it well, the market is not pricing it in. It's pricing in some risk. It's pricing in the threat of the competition. If they do perform that really well, the gains that an investor can get is pretty high. That's why I believe this is a multi-bagger opportunity and why I'm willing to own it and at the same time still own NVIDIA. There's people like me that are actually bullish in both. I know that might sound crazy, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.